minute. Once in a while, if someone asks us to, or we think it's important, we'll pause. But we're going to try to keep the slides moving. As you know, Martha and I did the El Camino this fall.
Speak up.
What?
Speak up.
Really?
Yes. Well, it starts here and then you sort of like...
There's a microphone over here.
Okay. So we're going to go back and forth, share some stories, and we want you to ask questions. So if something interests you or you have a question about something, just let us know. But we'll trade off. So, Martha?
All right. If I'm talking here, is it coming across the microphone?
Yeah. Oh, we can hear you. Get a little closer.
Okay. I'm going to start by way of introduction, just telling you that the Camino de Santiago is the way of St. James. It's a centuries-old pilgrimage route. Yes, older than centuries, millennia. Going back to the time when people who might have liked to have made a pilgrimage to the Holy Land found it was way too dangerous and much too expensive to be possible, and so other pilgrimages were made. This particular one, the way of St. James, are the route that St. James traveled, and Santiago de Compostela is where the remains of St. James are.
Is this the St. James that's the same as
the Apostle James, Apostle, yes. So one of the questions I've been most often asked is, did you go with some kind of tour group? And we didn't. We looked at a map and saw which towns the route went through, and Sue left in late September, flew to Paris, and took a train down to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. She started from there, and after I closed up the thrift shop at the end of September, then I flew to Madrid and took a train up to Pamplona. So she walked for 5 days before I arrived. She went through the Pyrenees. So she started up in here and met me here, Pamplona. And then together we did these hundreds of miles across northern Spain. Later on in the trip, as we got closer to Santiago, we did see people who were traveling with groups. Tour buses would bring people in and have them walk that last 100 kilometers. The nature of the walk changed quite a bit in those last 100 kilometers because so many people walk that portion of it. You can walk it in 4 or 5 days and still receive a Compostela when you reach Santiago. Fewer people start as far back as we did, and the experience in the early part of the walk was much different than what we experienced later on, where there are many more pilgrims walking. Another question a lot of people ask is, did you see a lot of other pilgrims? And that varied. Early on, we could walk all day and only see a couple other people. Then when we arrived at night at one of the albergues, there might be a dozen people there, but because you're all walking, someone could be just a half mile behind you or ahead of you, and you never would have seen them all day because you're all moving along. We generally started early, before sunrise or just after, walking sometimes in the dark. Generally had to walk a couple of hours before we found breakfast because in Spain, nobody does anything before 9 o'clock generally, and we had to start much earlier. If we did find any breakfast, it was at a bar, and the bars are also the coffee shops. So at night they're the bars, in the morning they're the coffee shop. But they tend to be at least one of them open in any village, if they had one, where you could get one of three things. You could get a croissant, or you could get a chocolate croissant, or you could get a potato tortilla, which is very rich and satisfying. Those three things, and only those three things for breakfast, almost everywhere. Did you want to start with particular?
I'll just make a comment about the routes. So you look up here and you see all these lines. It's not just one Camino de Santiago. We took the most popular route because it's the best supported, it's the best marked, it's the best traveled. So this red route is what we took. And I actually started on another Camino, the Chemin Le Puy, which is a French route. It starts in Le Puy and goes to Saint-Jean. And I started about here and then walked that first week by myself and met Martha in Pamplona, doing about 550 miles. Martha did about 450 miles. But as you can see, all those other paths lead to Santiago. You can come up from Lisbon, or you can come up from other parts of Spain, or from France. So you had people doing all of it, parts of it, coming from a different area. So there's many travelers going along the route, but we took the one most traveled, just because it was our first trip, and we, wanted to make sure we were, understood everything. Because honestly, you don't really get it as much as you read about it until you actually are out there walking. It's a little hard to understand that you don't put your boots by your bed, you leave them out in the hallway, they never go near your bed, sometimes your poles have to go out, sometimes your backpack has to go in the hallway. So until somebody tells you all those things, it's just like, oh really? I didn't understand, it's not in the book. So, well, because your boots are dirty, and honestly, these places were very, very clean. They don't want that muddy boot that you have trekked through wherever next to your bed, and they don't want your poles next to your bed. And some places didn't want your backpack next to your bed, but that was rare.
And also, they cram so many people into a single room. The place you sleep might be a room the size of this with, picture how many bunk beds you could cram into this room. Yeah, sets of bunk beds. And they just fill them all up at night. So that's another reason you don't want all those boots in the same room. It can get a little stuffy.
Yeah. I'm going to start this.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
yes. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, Alex.
I just wanted to say that I walked a small part of it some years
Oh,
ago.
yeah.
You were up here on the northern, in the Camino del Norte, and here, yeah, we met a man and his son who had walked from Czechoslovakia.
Oh, my God.
And were headed all the way.
We actually met someone who had walked from somewhere in Great Britain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to start this off. You guys feel free to interrupt. Whoops. I just leave the cursor there.
Start with that man. That's a statue of the man, I forget the name of the town he was in, but
Okay.
that statue was a mayor of that town, and he's considered the person responsible for bringing the Camino back into use again, more or less.
He set up the markers. He made sure there were yellow arrows to
markers so that it was
identify the
easy
way.
for people to find their way.
Right.
And as a result, the Camino started being walked again on a much more regular basis, and now is during the summer months or spring months, sometimes pretty heavily traveled.
Yeah. So I'm going to just show a few slides from the beginning, because I had that first week in Navarrenx, France, where I started, walked through this arch, immediately lost the path, fell down a slope on my butt with my pack, and then got myself going. But this is my picnic, my first picnic, There I am in Saint-Jean, Pied-de-Port,
after 3 days of walking with my guardian angels, this Dutch couple who'd helped me figure out how this all worked. They were wonderful. And then I walked through the Pyrenees, 2 days through the Pyrenees. Unbelievable, unbelievable scenery. Can you all see? And it was amazing. My laundry hanging out over the Pyrenees. Wild horses right on the road, just right there. And overlooking, having a picnic lunch overlooking the Pyrenees. It was amazing. And then, this is the kind of stuff you would just see. That
Can we make those and sell them at the fair?
we should. And there's Martha meeting me in Pamplona, and we're in Pamplona now. I had a day to kill before Martha joined me. And I'll just stop real quick. So they have these plaques, very similar to in Germany. This was a plaque for somebody who had died during the Spanish Civil War, and they honored that person who had lived in that house who had been assassinated. So I saw that and took a picture. It was right in the ground anyway. So there we go. Now, signage, every town has a different way of identifying the signs for their for the Camino that goes through. This happened to be this particular, whoops, we're not going.
The
This
scallop
particular.
shell symbol
Right.
is,
Navarrete, that
is
was
the
their sign. Oh, come
no
on.
matter how it's depicted.
These
The
things
scallop
going?
shell, if you see it, you know
Okay.
you're on the right
All right.
track.
And there's another one.
Yeah, different towns depicted it different ways.
And they have them in the ground, right, and those are my feet.
Sometimes right in the road, yeah.
So we didn't really get lost, except leaving towns. There's a shoe.
Sometimes it was just some rocks on the ground pointing
Yeah.
in the right direction.
That was a very typical sign at the end. Oh, that's a good idea.
You get it?
Yep. Well, no, we didn't eat scallops, but these were typical markings.
And if you look, a lot of people ask what the
these
actual
were-
path looked like, but if you look in all these pictures, it looks different everywhere. Sometimes it's a paved road or pavement. Sometimes it's just a gravel track. Sometimes it's just a little rutted lane, that you're walking in. But there are areas near the towns where the path has been graded and improved by the landowners who have farms and land on either side because they use it to access their land. So there's a nice ditch on either side, and it's been graded smooth and no big rocks. Other places, you can't take a step without looking down and placing your foot carefully to make sure you don't stumble from one step to the next.
Martha, is it marked Alberg up there? That's where you would stay and eat?
Yes,
Yes.
You found them on the map?
Yes, this was the maps we
If you
used.
see Albergue 3.9, the map will show if there's some place to stay in that town or a couple of places to stay in that town. So you had a pretty good chance of finding
these
a
are
room there.
pilgrims maps. So these are maps, guidebooks that tell us where to go. And one day I took pictures of them. I got tired of having, Martha, get out the book, Martha, get out the book, Martha, get out the book. So I said, let me take pictures, but it didn't work that well. So, but this was typical. It just shows you the kilometer markings between towns, where there's a place to stay, something to see. And I just sort of left it in to just give you an idea. And in fact, I brought our guidebook over there to show you if anybody wanted to see. But
And even though
Yep.
it was
and that
helpful
was
to
me
have the
checking the
map,
weather app.
it was
over my
helpful to
cafe
have the
con
map to
leche.
see where one thing was in relationship to another, to kind of, keep you aware of where you were going. We still missed a town that we
Oh,
were going
yeah.
to stay in one night and had
The
to
last
walk.
night.
After a long walk, we missed
on.
the town completely by many kilometers, and then had to walk way on into the dark to another town. So the map's helpful, but it's not
Come
foolproof.
on.
Charging
Come on.
stations for your iPad?
I'm trying to get this to go.
No.
I don't know why
In
it's
fact,
not.
what they have along the way are water fountains.
Come on.
There are water fountains all along the way so that pilgrims will have drinking water. The thing they don't have anywhere along the way are public restrooms.
I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm trying to get this to get unstuck here.
Give us an idea of how often
Whoops.
you would run into a town. I mean, is it like every 4 kilometers or something? Or it wasn't
Okay.
like 20 miles before you get to the next town.
No.
We go through 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 during the day. sometimes a city, sometimes a town that was so small it might be a cluster of 5 or 6 houses, and the path that went through between them was the street.
There was one place where it was 17 kilometers, and we were warned, have plenty of water, have plenty to
Yeah,
drink,
that there'd
eat.
be no food,
There
no
was
water,
nothing
no
for 17
shade.
kilometers, and that's, okay, let me show you. So this is a public art, if anybody's seen the movie The Way, these are big metal statues of pilgrims at the top of a pass, and you can see the wind turbines in the background. There were thousands of these wind
Thousands.
turbines. And
There are 20,000
so these are
wind
just at the
turbines in
top of a ridge going across, and they were amazing. And you can see we took our picture. Oh, come on now. Sorry guys, I don't know why it's
They do a
halting.
better job with sanitary facilities along that route
They-
than we do in Gloucester.
No.
There's no litter. There's no litter anywhere. Spain is so
I'm
clean.
talking about toilets.
No, there
Oh,
are no
no, there are
toilets.
no public,
There are
there are
no
no
toilets.
restrooms.
You step off the side of the road and you go to the bathroom. I'm sorry, guys, I don't know why this is not,
Public art is
Advancing.
something else we saw a lot of. A lot of public art, even in small towns. And
I haven't had this problem at all.
the towns that are adjacent to the Camino are very proud of their association with the Camino. And
Oh, goodness gracious.
it's obvious by the way
My glasses.
they mark their homes, and a lot of people will have scallop shells embedded in the wall of their home or over the door of their home. They name their homes after the Camino.
Thanks. I'm sorry, guys. We've done this 100 times and it's never frozen. Keep talking, Martha.
Okay. Well, yeah, this was at the top of a hill. You can see the track is gravel there. Sometimes a town will, because they're very proud of their association with the Camino, they'll
Thank you.
kind of improve the path through the town and out to their town limits,
Now the thing is
either by
frozen.
grading it or sometimes even paving it with stone. When you,
It's
there
not.
are some,
Well-
the corner that you see down there, it was around the base of a cross. And so it was just a small area that was paved there. The rest of the track, gravel with rocks on it. A lot of times you had to be, like I said, really careful looking at your feet when you walked. Other times it was easier. When we crossed the high plains, it's just flat and you can walk all day and not have to be concentrating on your feet or where you're walking. So it allows plenty of time for reflection.
What about elevation changes that were there? Climb a lot or?
Well, I can tell you, going through the Pyrenees, we went from Saint-Jean at 200 meters to almost 1,500 meters in 2 days. It was tough. That was tough.
If you take a look at the relief map that's on the table
I'm gonna
back
unplug
there,
this real quick.
it gives you a good idea of how mountainous northern Spain is. And there were 3 areas where we went through pretty high elevations. There were some days it seemed like all we did was walk uphill all day. There were some weeks that it seemed to me like all of Spain was uphill because it just didn't seem like there were any flat parts. You were just always walking up. There was one day we walked for half the day. It seemed like it was a 12% grade. And that's really steep. That's really hard on the joints, walking. And then you get to the top and find that it goes just like this and goes down at an 18% grade. So all the way down, your toes are just jammed into the toe of your boot. And there's nothing you can do about it. You can't, try to walk backwards. But your feet are just going to be jammed down into your toes every single step. So some days were just like that. Other days, even if the trail was a little more irregular, even though you were gaining elevation, it was more like taking a step up, not going up a steep ramp, So days could be difficult for different reasons. Another day, the walking wasn't hard, but we were in the blistering heat, and there just wasn't a scrap of shade all day long. So in the course of just a few weeks, the first 2 weeks, it was like a high summer. And then we had a couple of days that seemed like fall, and then it was winter. You'll see some pictures here. We're in 2 feet of snow.
No, the first month was all sun for me.
Yeah,
4 weeks
good weather.
plus. It was
Good weather.
beautiful. And then the next day, it went from 68 to 38, and we were really cold. It was just cold, and then it started to snow, and it was like, really? Where did this come from? All right, here we go.
Also, you probably mentioned that, yeah,
All right,
Okay.
you carried for clothes.
we both carried our packs with us. Sue got her pack down to 12 point something pounds, which was before.
Okay, so I cut my bar of soap in half, and I had to buy 2 bars of soap along the way.
So I knew that Sue had gotten her pack down to 12 pounds, but I
How
have an
silly
older
was
pack.
that?
And my pack itself weighs 4.5 pounds. So I was trying real hard to get the weight down. And because I know that,
Okay.
you know, if you're going to carry it every step of the way, you've got to get the weight down to something that's, you know, not going to be painful.
Let's try this again.
So I was talking about cutting the handle off my toothbrush, and
We were silly.
you know, we didn't, you know,
And then she carried
I'd be up to
7 apples.
then I was still 17 pounds, so I
right,
left my
here we
belt
go.
behind because I figured I didn't need that. My pants were snug fitting, so I left my belt behind.
on.
I traded my hairbrush for a pocket comb, you know, this
We
kind
were
of stuff.
ridiculous.
And, you know, I regretted every one of those decisions eventually. My hair's growing back, though.
Okay.
But,
All right. Here we go.
but, you know, like the belt, you know, I wouldn't even have noticed. For the whole trip, I never noticed the weight of my pack on my back. It was fitted correctly. Most of the weight, you know, was carried on my hips, and I just never noticed the weight. I could have put the hairbrush in there, or the belt, or whatever. You know, I carried a bag of apples. When we found apples growing, we picked apples. I carried those, didn't notice any weight. So, you know, you think that, you know, that extra ounce is going to be critical, but it really turned out not to be. A lot of people did not carry packs with them. There is a service that, I guess there are a few of these transport services that you can pay €5 or so and have your bag picked up and delivered to the albergue where you expect to be spending the night.
Okay.
So on the upside, you're not carrying that weight during the day, but the downside is you better make it to that albergue or you're not going to have your
All right.
pack.
I'm going to let this roll so that we're not here all night. You know, beautiful narrow streets and little
The
towns.
beautiful towns, yeah.
Yeah.
Everything's made of stone. And every window in Spain has bars on it, every one.
Lots of bales of hay.
Shuttered
That's where they put
windows
them.
and bars. Yeah, they stack their hay like that everywhere in Spain. This was a hill through the forest with these stone cairns
cairns.
as a shrine at the
Memorials.
top.
I know.
My hands are full of grapes there because when we were at that shrine area, we stopped there to have our lunch and we sat on a low wall. And we'd walked through a path through the forest to get there and didn't realize that from there down the other side was actually a road. While we were sitting there, a car came right up the road and drove right up in front of us there and did a 3-point turn and turned around. And then the man got out of the car, went around to the back, opened the hatch, and took out all those grapes and carried them
Yeah.
over and put them in my hands and wished us
Yeah.
buen camino and said some other things that we didn't understand and smiled and got in his car and drove away. And that's just one small example of the many times we were fed by people who identified us as pilgrims and fed us in some way. One walled garden outside one house, all the gates are closed and locked along there, but they had set a stool outside the gate that had a plate full of figs from the fig tree that was in their garden. One of the towns we passed through, the fountain in that town the water was no longer drinkable in the fountain in their town. And as we walked through that town, you'd see bottles of water set outside people's doorways.
So, real quick, I'm trying not to stop it because we'll be here all night.
Yes.
but-
This is the man who
Should I
was
slow him down?
collecting his almonds. There's almonds in the husk in a bucket. He was collecting them. They're the ones he'd already husked. And he was collecting them from his grove. And he invited us over and had us sit there on a piece of well tile while he cracked open almonds and handed them to us. And in the picture, I was holding a little prayer card. He hurried over to his car and got it and brought it over to give to us
Right.
before we went
Lots
on.
of public art. Every town has some display of it. And this was a typical path, just, you know, in the flat Meseta. It is,
There's fall.
but they only do yellow.
Good thing we got a
Only
picture of
yellow,
it.
no red. No, it's the end of the trip.
Yeah, toward the end.
It's really the end. Yeah. Lots of churches. We went to lots of pilgrim masses. It was wonderful, beautiful cathedrals. Oh my goodness, Lyon, Burgos, Astorga. We saw some unbelievably beautiful churches. And the pilgrims masses were very, you know, enriching, and too bad it was in Spanish.
And all this, it's very common, these just gilded
Huge,
reredos
ornate.
behind. Very ornate,
Yeah.
everything.
It's either Burgos or Lyon.
That's Burgos.
Have relics,
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
many of them do. And some of in the larger towns, the churches and cathedrals were open and you could go in. In the
Then you
smaller
had little
towns,
ones.
often they were not.
Like this, you
not
couldn't
open.
get in there.
No, but we could peek in.
Heated pews, guys.
Look at
Every
this.
pew
There's a
has a
radiator,
heater.
a radiator under every pew.
Grapevines growing up from one stalk across the balconies.
Almost
Amazing.
fun.
And that's what we were there during harvest season.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see, they are just loaded.
And grapes for
Loaded with
pilgrims
grapes.
with a sign saying, "Help yourself."
And yes,
And that
another,
was the harvest, right there at the truck.
another time we were invited to pick the grapes from this person's
Okay,
garden.
grapes that come out, red wine on one side, water on the other.
Yeah. You notice,
We're at the red wine side.
we're both filling up from the red wine side.
Yeah. The end of a long day. Yes. Local wines.
So this name on this wine bottle, very often the name on the wine bottle that night at dinner was
Right.
the name that on the vineyard that we had just passed, you know, or the bodega that's, you know, in the same neighborhood where we were
Lots
eating.
of rocks, no sunrises, no sunsets, just sunrises. Because the sun doesn't rise till 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock. By the time daylight saving changed, it was 9 a.m. before the sunrise was. And I'm not kidding, 9 a.m. Lots of shrines.
They had the piece of the Jesus' cross.
I'm not sure we saw that. Another place where people had folded papers and all these shrines where people brought prayer cards and pictures and an umbrella, you know, all these
Yeah.
mementos of family members or friends who died. And
There were all
canals
kinds of
lit-
ways.
Canals with, you know, vegetables growing in them and, yeah.
have pieces of the original cross to inhabit a forest.
Yeah, it was a
Yeah.
very large cross, I think.
Yeah, this was a
That was at a monastery where we stayed,
Slept
and
on
we
the
slept
floor.
on mats on the floor.
It was very comfortable.
And surprisingly, we were all comfortable.
Big communal meal.
Big, very nice communal meal that we had. Now, that albergue did not charge a fee. It was a donativo, so you leave what you can afford. But you have to keep in mind that the dinner that we ate that night, and
We
it
like
was
the
a
recycling.
wonderful dinner, that was paid for by the people who left their money in the pot the night before.
That's a
So
municipal
you
albergue,
know
yeah.
the money you put in the pot is going to feed the next pilgrim the next night,
So these are typical bunk bed rooms with our laundry hanging every night. We wash out our laundry. We took turns until Martha's leg got bad, and then I nobly went upstairs.
Yeah, because my leg really hurt for a long time.
But that's very typical. We hung our wash out outside when it was nice,
Yeah.
inside when it was cold.
Those are the apples I picked along the way.
Washing our laundry.
What you carried with you and how you did that, because you had to wash every day.
We did. We only had 2 outfits, and there we're doing our wash. I'm wearing one, I wash the other.
Yeah.
There, my boots didn't hold up so well.
So it was important that when we found a place to sleep, the first thing we did was get a shower and
Yeah.
get out of our dirty clothes, wash those clothes and get them hung up to dry,
Right.
because in the morning they had to go in our pack.
Right.
And
So
as long,
we also shopped at the grocery store. And
and it was funny that they sold walnuts in the grocery store because
Yeah.
walnuts were all over the ground everywhere.
yeah. Just kind of cool old towns and buildings. And then the weather turned bad.
Yeah, then we got the rain.
The rains and the rains. Cows going through towns.
Some towns had more animals than people in them, and the
1,000-year-old
street
Roman
was
bridges.
really given over to the animals.
Oh, yeah.
We
Yeah.
did
Yeah.
walk on some of the Roman roads, and I don't know if the picture's included in here, but I took a couple of pictures just down on the road. The Roman roads were built of rock and smaller rock and, you know, to gravel, and we walked on roads that were built by the Romans that were in perfect condition. There were some places where the perimeter had, you know, been worn and been patched up, but there were other areas where you'd walk a long way, and the road was just in great condition. Yeah, thousands of years old.
It's the sunrise. We didn't see a single sunset.
No. We watched the sun
I
come
had to
up a
wake
lot of
Martha up every
mornings.
morning just to get out by, you know, daylight. I don't know why we're not working here.
So when we started off in the dark wearing our headlamps, there were a couple of times that we came across some funny things. One
They're
of them,
coming up.
there are 3 pictures in here. It appeared as I was walking along that there was a figure standing up ahead, and it wasn't moving. And we were far enough off that I kind of slowed down, and Sue was just behind me. And as I got a little closer, the figure still hadn't moved. And we started walking slower and slower
It was creepy.
because we could see that figure
There
up
it
there.
is. Well, wait a minute.
It
Okay,
turned out
so
to be,
It was this view, and then that view. It was really creepy.
it turned out to be just at the end of somebody's
Come on.
drive, and there's the team they support or something is the jersey on the thing.
And this is the place where
But
you-
in the dark,
yeah.
you know,
Right.
you just don't know what you're walking up on.
And this is where you leave you bring a stone from home and throw it off to a place where,
This town has a population of 1.
yeah.
Population of 1.
Your little booklet stamped every night?
Yes. Yes, I brought my
Yes.
booklet with me, if you look at it, yep.
Yes.
Oops, come on. This was the beginning of the bad weather with the snow. We had
But
snow
again, you can
showers
see the
this day.
turbines all along the
And then the next day, it really was snowing. It was awful. And we didn't have snow gear. You know, we're wearing a
So in our
shirt and a
backpacks,
fleece
we
and
each
a-
had, you know, the shirt and pants we were wearing, and we had a spare in our backpacks. We each had 3 pair of socks because they take more than 1 night to dry out. Then we had 1 warm layer, which was a fleece jacket, 1 wind layer, which, you know, a
Rain layer,
windbreaker,
yep.
and then the poncho.
It was
The
tough.
items that we wore to sleep in at night could double as long underwear. So when we reached the 2 feet of snow, if we had everything that was in our backpack on our bodies and we were moving, we would be warm enough.
Yeah. This is an 800-year-old oak tree. This is when I was walking by myself and Martha was recuperating. So I had 2 days alone to catch up, and this is where she was
That's my little
recuperating.
6-room hotel
Yeah,
where I
that's
stayed
quite
for
nice.
4 nights. There were 6 rooms in the hotel, and I was the only one there, meaning the only one there. There was no staff. There was no receptionist. I was the only one there.
This is our 100-mile,
A man came in every day, the owner came in every day a couple of times and put wood in the wood stove so it stayed warm.
this is getting our Compostellas. And I went grocery shopping
Sue
for
went
her.
grocery shopping and left me some microwave things and a box of cereal and all, and
Oh, that's
And so I had food. The owner did, on the fourth day, I was not in my room when he came, but I was out in the sitting area. And he was very concerned about whether I had enough food. And he had brought bottled water. And yes, and then we first made a reservation for 3 days, but then I needed a fourth day before I could walk. And but he kept putting me off as to, letting me pay for the fourth day. And in the end, he never collected it. We had to put the cash in his little desk, before we left that fourth morning.
Martin, want to explain your injury?
My injury was a cellulitis infection in my leg that probably originated because during some of those punishing down hills, I damaged a toenail on one of my toes. And so it was probably a source or bacteria could get into the leg. And either because I was constantly wearing socks or just the walking, an infection settled in my leg and caused a, painful swelling. So when I realized that the pain was not shin splints or, just from overuse and that it was an infection, we took a taxi to a town that had an urgent care facility, and then I treated Sue to her first ambulance ride from there to a larger city that had a teaching hospital, and I was treated there very efficiently, I should say, in and out in 3 hours. Very efficient.
And how much did it cost?
I haven't gotten a bill yet.
But the ambulance ride was free. That's what they told us.
One thing that you haven't told, and that is really important.
What?
Martha had this app that basically was...
Oh, right.
Oh, yeah.
So the night
Yes.
before she went to the doctor, she basically wrote out like 20 questions and answered all
Yep.
of them.
Oh, yeah.
Everything,
Google Translate and then handed it.
everything I thought that they would ask me at the clinic, I had the answers all translated the night before and had them in there. So when I got there, well, actually, when we got to the first bar where there'd be a telephone, I had the one that said, "I have injured my leg. I need a doctor. Can you help me?" And then I had another one there that, that I could show the taxi driver, where I needed to go. And then another one, I knew when they, what they would ask me when I got to the hospital, and had them all ready to go on there. And they also use Google Translate at the hospital, so they could, it was very handy.
Where did you recharge your phone? Did it have electric?
Oh, yeah. Every night they had a series of
Every
plugs. There was
night.
never a problem.
Yeah, electrical plugs, and we had adapters for Northern Europe.
That was the
or
least of our
Southern
problems.
Europe.
It
Yeah,
would have been nice to have a cell phone, have cell service. We didn't have that, and it would have been nice.
but we both have iPhones, and so when we were someplace where we could get a Wi-Fi signal, we could use our FaceTime app to call home, and that didn't
Yeah.
cost us anything.
Yeah.
We're stuck on this one.
Call, I was like at the checkout at Home Depot.
Had to make an appointment.
Yeah, to talk to Jim, I had to make an appointment.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, and I sat home, I didn't leave the house until I heard that she got to where she was going. Every single morning, I sat there until I heard from her, because I wanted to know she was okay.
We're stuck on this.
I know, it's over, that's the last slide.
Oh, it's the end. Oh,
I can start them through again.
okay. The end.
Any other questions, or?
Yeah, tell us about when you got to the Cathedral at Santiago. Swinging,
Oh, yeah.
That was really cool. We had those last 5 days coming from Saria where Martha's leg was resting. That's where the crowds were. We had busloads of Japanese tourists and busloads of high school kids. And those first 2 days, we saw everybody, it's raining. We see the orange ponchos with the Japanese go by and the green ponchos with the kids. And then it's us and just a handful of other pilgrims. And then finally we got off the schedule enough, so the last 3 days, we were by ourselves, practically. The Japanese were ahead of us, the high school kids were ahead of us, everybody was ahead of us. It was great. So we had the road to ourselves for the most part. We got into Santiago very early that last morning because we'd been so good about finding our places to stay. Every night we know where we're going. You know, by lunchtime we know where we're going to stop. And that last day we missed, it was like, well, look at all those albergues, but it doesn't say that's the name of the town we're going to. So we just kept walking, and we had to go an extra like 9 kilometers, which is almost 6 miles. And that was, we'd already been out a long day. So we ended up arriving to our town in the dark. We'd never done that before. We went to a great place. We stayed our last night in a wonderful spot. And so we got into Santiago at 10 o'clock the next morning in the rain. And it took us a while to find the place where you get your compostelos, which, if you don't know what that is the official certificate that is provided to pilgrims who have completed at least 100 kilometers of the pilgrimage. Now, we obviously did a lot more. I did 880. What did you do, Martha?
740
right.
something.
So we went above and beyond, obviously, but we had, you know, that was our goal. So we got our compostelos. We went then to the church, the cathedral for the pilgrimage mass, and we were very early for that. So we kept shifting seats, trying to find the best position. I think we moved 3 times. Finally, the service started, and they do, you know, the thoroughfare on steroids, and it's the Buena, it's got a name, but it takes 6 men to pull on the ropes that cause this beautiful thoroughfare to go the whole way across the cathedral, back and forth. And, you know, they say, no pictures, please.
Big.
It's huge.
It's this big.
And we are
it's
just
silver.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
The Boda Fumera, and
And the
it was
incense is
unbelievable.
blazing in there.
We are just glued to watching this, and the men are pulling this up in this beautiful dance, and just making this thing go back and forth. Yes, it is very easy to find.
You can see it on YouTube, and you'll see there are about 6 men pulling on the rope.
It was incredible.
And then they run across and they pull in the other direction. So
Just
it
at the right
swings by.
time to make it go.
And as it comes down, you can see it's blazing. There's flame in there. And what was really interesting for me is that I was absolutely sure that we were on the day that they were going to burn the cathedral down. Right. Because when this thing went up, it was going all the way up sideways before it came down again, and you could see the flame in it. And I just knew that we were there on the right day. That was going to be exciting.
Supposedly in the 1400s, the rope broke and it went out the window.
Oh, no! Oh, that's a much better
Well,
story.
that's a good story. That was
Yeah.
really going, though.
Yeah, but it was a great ending to the trip. No, this is, I don't know where this is. This is the Meseta someplace. And the only reason I say that is because it is flat and dry. And we spent a week in a flat, dry area where every day, and it wasn't perfectly flat like being in, you know, Indiana or someplace like that with cornfields. But there was enough little variation.
yeah.
But you could see 360 degrees almost all day long. And you could see mountains way off. As far as you could see, it was amazing. Must have been early in the day. I
Not
don't
much
know.
grows on the plain. It's at a high elevation, so grasses are the only thing that grow there. So you walk all day by hay fields and some wheat. And
It just,
contrary to popular belief, the rain in Spain does not fall, mainly on the plain.
Yeah.
Instead, we had great weather on the Meseta, and the last 5 days of our trip, it rained hard and all day long.
yeah, it was,
And
was
so,
awful.
you know, no matter how good your boots are, you can't keep them dry in that kind of rain. So after a few days of that, our boots were wet, and then we had to actually, toward the end, stop washing our clothes because we couldn't afford to get anything wet because it wasn't going to dry.
right.
And just putting those feet into those cold, wet boots every morning was,
So I only had to wear
Starting to
my
get old.
my clothes 1 week before I could wash them. What?
I just was going to say, I always thought these pictures of the Masada were good because if you consider there's no restrooms, that little hay is where. That's right.
Yeah.
a little
There are no
green on the
restrooms,
side.
right, you know that. Yeah.
I just want to also say, you know, it would be, for people thinking, oh, okay, that would be a cool thing to do, I'd like to go to Europe for 5 weeks. But you would, any anybody in the United States that's ever been to Europe would assume, you know, like, gosh, a hotel's gotta cost $300 a night or something like that. It would cost me like $9,000 to do 5 weeks. So just give us a little idea about the cost for a pilgrim.
Okay, so pilgrim would pay to spend the night at an albergue, which is a dormitory. You saw those bunks, 5 to 10 euros. Now the euro at $1.25 per euro is, you know, so that is $7.50 to, you know, $12 a night. That doesn't include meals.
No, for that-
You can get, for 10 euro, you can get a pilgrim's meal, 3 courses, you know, starter, which is a salad or soup or something, or pasta, then meat and fries, fish and fries, chicken and fries for your second course, and then flan, cheesecake or ice cream, plus all the wine and bread you could ever want.
Whether you
That's
asked
your
for it
dinner
or not.
every night, right.
Whether
10
you asked
euros.
for it or not, the pitcher of red wine was on the table.
Right, and then, you know, lunch and other meals, you know, 2.5, 3 euros for breakfast, you know, 4 to 5 euros for lunch. You know, we would picnic when the weather was nice. You saw the picture of me carrying the bread on my back, and we had cheese and ham stuffed in our packs, and fruit and chocolate bars, and, you know, it didn't cost that much. So 35 euros a day would cover it.
We always
it isn't
carried a
that
little
much.
bit of food with us, bread and some cured meat and cheese, because there were times when we wouldn't find anything or midday, and we'd just eat what was in the pack. One night we had to do that for dinner, just one night.
When we got tired of the pilgrim's dinners, we ate, you know, yogurt and fruit and nuts because we were tired of those big, heavy meals. Yeah.
Mainly because by the time you get your shower and get your laundry done and find food and eat it, it's 7:30 at night. But you got to be in your bunk by 8:30 if you're getting up that early, and you're tired at night. So, yeah, going to bed on a full stomach every night started to wear.
So.
What time did you usually stop for lunch?
Oh, like 12 to 1 probably, or 1:30. Yeah, 1:30, sometimes as late as 2 o'clock. But that's when, yeah, for the most part, I would say.
Yeah.
We were both creatures of habit.
And a lot of mornings we had 2 breakfasts, so
Yeah,
we
we
didn't have
did.
to stop early for lunch.
Then we'd stop a little later for lunch. But you're right, dinner wasn't until 7 o'clock if you went to eat out, and that was the early dinner.
Lunch was usually, when I was doing it, between 1 and 2, was about when my
Yeah, yeah. It just depended where we were and what, if we were picnicking or, you know, yeah.
Mark, tell the story about the guy that had his house open for the bathroom.
Oh, yes, oh, yes. We were walking through a small town, and many of these towns, the houses are all stone, they're on either side of the street. Actually, the street goes right to the stone house. Little greenery at all in some of these towns
just gonna
because
run this
everything's paved. But there was a chair outside the door of this home with a sign on it, so I walked over to read the sign, and the sign said that there were toilets, and it said no donation, free. And the door was open on the house, and I looked in, and down the hall I could see the bathroom door and the toilet there. And considering that nowhere in Spain are there any public restrooms for pilgrims, we thought that was a great place to stop, so we both did. But the gentleman who owned the house, an old man who had an even older dog, came walking from somewhere across the street to greet us, and then he invited us into the other part of his house where he had a table laid out. He had homemade applesauce that he had made himself and was very proud to tell us that it didn't have any sugar in it. And he had little toast squares that he put applesauce on and gave to us. There were grapes. He had something else there. Oh, nuts. But that's what he did every day, was open his house to pilgrims who would be walking by. There were so many examples of that. We stopped in Logroño in a beautiful park and just sat down on a bench to rest. It wasn't really even time for us to eat. We were just tired. And an elderly man came over and was talking to us and pointing to a tree, and he beckoned us to pay attention to him, and he went over to the tree and reached up and started shaking on the branches, and walnuts fell down in the husk, and he was peeling them open. He took them over to the stone wall, cracked them all open, and brought the nut meats over for us. There were just so many examples of people who seemed to feel that it was their spiritual journey to assist someone else along the way.
And you know, when we followed the path very nicely because the yellow arrows were very distinct. We had no trouble. But every morning, you know, you walk into a town, it's light, you go to your albergue, you spend the night, you might walk around town, then you go to bed, you get up, it's dark. It's like, well, which way did we come in? Did we come in the right or the left? And so sometimes we couldn't find the arrow and we'd be just kind of standing there. Well, how do you get out of town? Even a little town. And somebody would come by in a car and do this. Or from a window, hey, you know, like this.
Oh yeah, a third floor apartment
pedestrian.
window. From a third floor apartment window, we hear somebody going, hey, 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 hey. And we look up there and he's going, pointing the other way.
Oh,
no,
yeah.
no, this way.
People did it all the time. All you have to do is stand there and look, you know, stupid and lost. They come right up to you and help you. People couldn't have been nicer. And considering you're walking through their backyards practically. Some of these tiny hamlets, you know, it's like living on the bike path around, you know, if you live near a bike path, you are in their backyards. And
Walking right past their front door.
Oh, yeah.
Every day.
And this was a kind of place we'd bump into where people, you know, had food out there for the pilgrims. Now, you had to pay for it, but it would be like a donativo. Whatever you want to give. And I made the mistake one day of picking up an apple at one of these places in the middle of nowhere. Oh, an apple would be great. And I had trouble with the coins because there are 8 different coins in the euros. And I gave the guy, by mistake, instead of 50 cents, I gave him 5. Well, he was insulted. He was took the apple away and said, "You've insulted me. You've hurt my feelings. I can't believe you pilgrims." And he went on and on and said, "I'm sorry, I got the wrong coin." And he was so angry. It was like, "You need another line of work, buddy."
Yes. So I actually said a prayer for him when we got to Santiago, that he finds something more fulfilling to do in his life.
I've been doing this for 7 years, and it was like, "Well, I'm sorry, I just picked the wrong coin." Oh. But anyway, it was an incredible journey. It was just public shrines everywhere you look, a cross, a guy playing in the middle of nowhere,
in the middle of nowhere.
Guitar,
He played
in the middle
beautifully.
of nowhere. We stood there and listened for 10 minutes. These plaintive songs coming out of his voice. People leaving grapes on the side of the road there.
We only talked about the kind of places
Martha,
that
who
stayed.
who could not bear to carry her espresso machine another kilometer. I said, just leave it on the side of the road, for God's sake.
She's kidding.
And
She's kidding. That
took it out of
wasn't
her
mine.
pack. No,
That wasn't mine. But as we walked along, we did see things that people like that espresso machine where somebody just decided their pack was way too heavy and they just jettisoned something that
you brought the espresso
they
machine.
decided not to bring. But so we mostly just talked about the kind of places we stayed, which were dormitory style and very inexpensive. But it's possible to do this walk, and as I said, you could have your luggage sent ahead if you know, to lighten the load, so you just weren't walking with the weight. But there were also more expensive places to stay. We didn't stay in them, but you could get a private room that had a bathroom with a door on it. And
on my birthday, I treated us to a double room where we had 2 beds in 1 room. The bathroom was down the hall, but that was
Sue's birthday celebration. Was that we had a bed. We slept between sheets in a room that
was very
with a
exciting.
bathroom that was just for us with a door on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
At Vestry the other night, you mentioned that about one of the benefits was the time that you were able to think about your life, and you guys haven't mentioned about it.
No, that was really true. I mean, we both went with the expectation and the hope for some solitary time to, you know, just be with our own thoughts and be by ourselves, and even though we were going to be together, to have that time to really do some inner work. And it's just not the kind of stuff you can do easily at home. And we had hour after hour. And the nice thing about we found out that we were pretty compatible walkers, at least I think we were. We could be together all day long, but not be together for big chunks of it. We would be walking, sometimes next to each other, but oftentimes one of us would be this way or that way. And just in our own thoughts, and just quiet. And I don't know if Mark is still here, and he said to me, you got to tell them how, when I went over there, I had all these hymns queued up in my head for when I got bored, and I thought, okay, don't forget 518, 618, 665. You love those hymns. Okay, think of them so when you get really bored, because you will, you can just pull those hymns out and hum along. I didn't pull one hymn out. I was never bored. I was never not engaged in my own mind. Thought, prayer, meditation. It was easy to stay inside of myself the whole trip, and I was amazed at that. And, you know, when it was time for us to talk, one person would come up to the other and say something, and we'd chat, and then we'd separate again. And it worked out really nicely to have all this time to do all this work, and all this prayer, and all this thought, and it was great. I mean, it's just not something you can do easily at home with all the
Well, there were a few afternoons
distractions.
where we just talked all afternoon.
Well,
but
there were.
But when you
We
remove
were
yourself...
entertained by
Yes.
things like the grape harvest and the potatoes going through the potato factory, and we watched or the car wash. We stood for 10 or 15 minutes and watched a
very
car wash
different.
machine
They're
go
very
over
different
the
in
car
Spain.
instead of the car going through it. We just stood there like, look at that, you know. Or the recycling bins.
There's a picture of it here. Right next to the car wash is the bicycle wash.
Oh my God, I didn't put that in, but yes, we got a picture of that. You know, so we were endlessly entertained by some
That
of those
stone
kinds of things.
beehive structure you saw there, we were way out in the hills, it's seemingly miles from everything, but there were vineyards out there. And we'd see those beehives, stone beehive shaped, in very poor condition. And I thought they were for shepherds from time back, shelters for shepherds, because there were a lot of sheep in Spain. And it turned out later, we found out they were shelters for shepherds, but they weren't watching out for their sheep, they were watching the vineyards. So apparently, at one time you had to watch your grapes pretty carefully, station someone out in your vineyards to keep an eye on them.
In France, because I started on the Chemin Le Puy, and it was a little bit different, but they have planted heirloom fruit trees along the trail. And they're not harvesting because they're very young trees, but you would see the signs on the trees so that down the road, they're going to be there for pilgrims to eat from. And we saw more trees in Spain on the other side of a fence, on the, you know, just out of reach, fruit trees, nut trees, and just it was like, oh my God, I look at that pear just hanging from that tree. But it wasn't, you know, wasn't available to us. And it would be lovely to see more of that because it's a great way to feed the pilgrims and to, you know, we saw a lot of fruit sitting on trees and a lot of, you know, vegetables sitting in gardens because it's still warm out there, it's still in the 50s. The harvest just went on and on.
Yeah.
You know, full pepper plants and tomato plants. You know, it's different climate.
This bunk bed we had to take a picture of because you could actually sit up and not have your hair being torn out on the springs of the mattress above
Yeah,
you.
like that one,
Like,
practically.
A lot of them, yeah, you couldn't even sit up straight underneath.
Sometimes
And,
we
you know,
washed our
after a
laundry
month of
outside.
sleeping on it becomes important.
Yeah.
So another thing you guys didn't mention, a benefit was when you did eat dinner, that, you know, lots of times it's all stuff that's locally grown,
Yeah.
put together by a chef, right there.
Yeah.
You know, very simple.
Yep.
but just delicious.
Yes, one place that we stopped to have sandwiches made, the chorizo sausage that was going into our sandwich, the man, that was his sausage that he was selling in his shop, that he was putting in our sandwich. And another night with our red wine, we had some olives that the host had given us. Those were her olives that she put up. There are a lot of examples like that of
When we ate
with
out in
the-
Seria the first night I got back and you were ready to go out and take nourishment instead of eating supermarket food for 2 days, we went across to the local bar and for €3 we had a bottle of wine with her label with the name of her restaurant on it. You know, it was that kind of local.
Yeah.
I mean, and the shops are tiny. You go to the bread shop, you go to the fish shop, you go to the meat shop, you go get fruit. it's the way it probably was in this country 60, 70, 80 years ago. And they live their lives that way all the time. Nobody has big superstores. It was oh my God, it was wonderful. And there was a picture, we didn't talk about it, but a picture of a knit shop. I mean, it was just all knitted goods. And I took it for Kim Prentice. I was hoping she'd be here tonight because it was like, oh my, Kim would love this. Look at all these knitted goods. You know,
One of the
specialty shops in every town.
One of the examples of public art was a town that we walked into in a small plaza. All of the trees in the plaza were wearing knitted garments.
Yeah.
And there were garlands going between them. They were all knitted things.
Yes, Naomi.
I just talk about, because we just went by the pictures of the hills of rocks where you carry your stone. Just talk,
Oh.
you sort of mentioned it.
Yeah, I can't think of the name of the town, what the town it was, but the day of the bad weather, where we had our first snow squall, there is a place that you carry a stone from home and you bring it with you to throw at the top of this pile of stones that is huge. And it is the place where you let go of all the things you need to let go of in your life and in yourself. And sadly, because it was a snow squall, I couldn't spend enough time up there, so I feel like I need to go back because I couldn't let go of everything. You know, I just didn't have time. So I'll
Fortunately,
have to return because the weather was so lousy, we just had to get off the hill.
Yeah. Fortunately, though, I had spent some time with my stone before we left,
Yeah.
so
What a surprise.
I just flung it. I was done.
But that was very, that was very moving.
Yeah, it was supposed to be one of the more meaningful parts along the walk, but we were huddled down in our...
It was our longest, crappiest day.
There was a whipping
10 hours
ice
on the
driving little
road.
particles of ice into our face.
No,
and
we were out
didn't-
for 10 hours, it was cold, and
We
we
didn't
ended the
delay.
day in a snowstorm. It was just, I said to Martha, we will never forget this day.
These were exciting. There are two pictures of us pointing to that because that's the marker that shows we only have 100 kilometers left to go. That's
Yeah.
when it started to look like we were really going to make it.
Right. That's a fake, but that's the Santiago Cathedral in the rain. Yeah, that was it in the rain.
Santiago.
Yeah. And this is along the way. Yeah. But,
If you could put the YouTube video of the guys at the cathedral.
oh yeah, see if I can find it. Oh yeah, this should
Yeah,
be,
that was kind of exciting.
If you can't, watch the movie The Way, because it ends with that.
all right, let me take this off so there's no,
I'm going to have to watch that movie again.
it's a great movie if you haven't
I saw
seen
it
it.
years ago.
Oh, I think this whole, oh, I did reboot this whole thing. Nice birds. All right, let me, come on. I'll bet. I don't know why this thing was so, pesky. Yes. Yes. Oh, she's so good. All right, thank you. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Bret. Thank you.
Yeah. You know, what was funny about it is every day was different, and we'd see all these unique different things. Oh yeah, you've got to
Oh, so
watch
that's what we
this.
saw. Yeah.
Once,
Yeah,
yeah, and once they get it going, it is really going.
it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
How come I just think of Edgar Allan Poe, The Pendulum?
Now, look how horizontal this thing's going up there.
It's a huge
It's
cathedral.
just tipping.
Yes, yes.
It's at the end. And you can see why I thought that we were there on the day that it was going to burn down.
I didn't think so.
It's,
It wasn't that smoky. It wasn't.
no, it wasn't, I mean, it wasn't suffocating at all. And it's
wasn't
spread
like
out,
here.
yeah. It was very nice, actually.
What? You ready to do it? It was. He was.
5 weeks.
I was gone for 6+ weeks.
And,
I happened to see it.
You know, there's no shame
Voto Fumario.
in whatever you need to do. It's absolutely fine. But you know, no one day was awful or hard. But it's the cumulative effects that I'm going to talk about. See, I got tendinitis. I got vertigo. I got a terrible stomach. I've never been so